Tonight, it's Chicago Med and the epic Chicago Fire PD crossover event with a case so dangerous.
There's been a robbery every 72 hours.
It will take 2 teams to solve. Wednesday's biggest dramas are on NBC.
And think there's no reason to stay up until 11? Let's do the math. 4 radars, more choppers, and this team equals more coverage at 11. Chuck, Colleen, Fritz, Fred. Call on these 4 before you call it a night. NBC 4 News at 11.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, folks. How are you doing? I hope you are doing well. And, I had a little audio there that you may have heard, and I wanted to tease you a little bit with, my guest who is, amongst many things, a operatic star. But before we get started, let's get right into thanking you for listening to the show and to being here with us mid-February-ish, end of February. Either way, whatever the date is, I'm glad you're here with us. I'm Danny Tisdale, and you're on the Danny Tisdale Show. And we, as we always do each week, talk to leaders, legends, and trailblazers in the world of Harlem and outside the world of Harlem. You can always stay in contact with us by hitting us up at twitter.com/HWMag. Also on Facebook, of course, at Harlem World Magazine. And you know what? On any social site, just put in Harlem World Magazine, and I'm sure you can find us. If not, let us know, and we'll hook it up. Also, don't forget to hit us up at harlemworldmagazine.com, harlemworldmagazine.com, where you can hear the podcast I'm about to do and other podcasts that we've done in the past. And, of course, as you know that I say each time, don't forget to like us, love us, and share us. And also, don't forget that you can sponsor the show if you want to spread your brand love across our podcast to our wonderful listeners. And when it's on the website, our readers. Okay. In honor of Black History Month, we have a great conversation today, and some of you may say a little self-interest, but this is a great conversation that I'm looking forward to, and this is with DeAnna Esther Marie Tisdale, my cousin, yes, and daughter of Charles Tisdale, one-time owner of the Jackson Advocate. DeAnna has performed in Los Angeles at the 102nd Annual NAACP Convention during and receiving the Spingarn Award. And if I got it wrong, I'm sure she'll correct me. And she's also performed internationally. She has received her Bachelor of Arts Degree and Master's of Music degree in vocal performance. She has graduated, and she graduated magna cum laude, and is a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. She continues the legacy of her father, my uncle, Charles Tisdale, and the work that he started at the Jackson Advocate newspaper in Jackson, Mississippi. She is also, another job title, associate publisher of the well-known publication. DeAnna, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm glad that we've had an opportunity, a chance to talk to each other, and more importantly, to talk about your father, my uncle Charles Tisdale, and his work at the Jackson Advocate. I thought, yes, for you listeners out there, it's a little self-interest, but it's also part of our history, our American history, and to drill down even further, our African-American history. And what a great opportunity, at least for us, for me, to talk a little bit about a historian during Black History Month that is familiar to me and to others. And, DeAnna, before I get started, I just wanted to, mention what someone has said about Uncle Charlie. And this is what Ben Jealous said at the NAACP when he was president. I carry a lot of Mr. Tisdale with me. The biggest gift he gave me was understanding what it meant to be committed to something. And so I wanted to ask you, DeAnna, Uncle Charlie, Charles Tisdale, your father, my uncle, who was he, and how do you describe him as your father, my uncle, and more importantly, maybe not more importantly, but as Charles Tisdale, owner of the Jackson Advocate?
Well, first I would say that he was a man among men. He used that phrase a lot. He liked to say that he was a man among men, so he felt like he was leading the charge, especially in writing, using the power of words to fight for justice and equality in Mississippi from 1978 to 2007 when he passed away. So he, like I said, he would say that he was a man among men and that he was civil rights 24/7.
24/7, never took a day off.
24/7, never.
So go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, we would definitely have people come to our home anytime that they needed help. The doors to the office were always open to the community. Our home was often open to the community. And my dad he never met someone that he didn't want to help.
That sounds about right. And that must have been, at times, pretty exhausting at the same time, I can imagine, because there's never any downtime.
Well, I mean, he really balanced it well. I can say that about my parents.
Okay.
I'm 33 now, but I hope to find the balance of life that they did, because sometimes, when I talk about my dad, it's with a different lens than other people knew him through. So I never knew him to say an unkind word to me. He was very loving. He was the cook at our house, and he loved to cook. He could spend 3 hours in the grocery store. He loved to do that. It was like his toy store, like his Home Depot. And so I got to see a lot of the love side. Right, it was the grocery store. And so I got to see a lot of that from him. But a lot of people got to see like the fighting side of him fighting for someone who needed help, or him fighting against an injustice.
He was on the spot. And so, just for our listeners, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I think the moments I got to spend with Uncle Charlie was, when he visited or when we visited him in it might have been Alabama, as he's visiting, his parents, my grandparents. But I'm curious, from what made him the man that he was? That conviction he had, and his commitment to community. Where do you get that from, you think?
I think that a lot of it has to do, with where he grew up in Athens. Especially going to Trinity High School, which was the first African-American high school there in that part of Alabama. And so coming from that legacy where people like C. Eric Lincoln, who went on to be a shining professor at Duke University, or Judge, I think his last name is Pincham, who was a judge in Illinois, coming from that level of greatness, having friends who really wanted to achieve something and fight for people, it just grew in him that way from Trinity High School on.
And I had read somewhere that he had started in publishing with linotype and, the old school of publishing, setting up the a press with a letter at a time, and I did, believe it or not, some of that in college. So I was, taken aback by that. But where did the idea come from for him to purchase the Jackson Advocate? Was it just a natural step, you think, or was it just the right timing?
I think it was the right timing because at the time he was living in Memphis and working for the black newspaper there, which is the Tri-State Defender. And so maybe by word of mouth and being a part of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the NNPA, heard that the publisher of the Jackson Advocate at the time, who was Percy Green, had unfortunately passed away. And my dad talked to his wife and agreed to purchase the paper from there. And I think that was in 1978.
Right.
In 1978.
Yes, and all the issues that came with that, fighting the Ku Klux Klan and burning the press. And where you weren't born at that time, correct? I'm trying to do the math in my head.
Actually, the last time
we
firebombed, I was 10 years old.
Okay.
No, I was 12 years old. It was in 1998, and I was born in 86. So I was 12 years old when I had just turned 12 when it happened, because it was January of that year.
Wow. And I mentioned that because – I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I mention it because, when people think of, Ku Klux Klan bombing and, that kind of action, that those things happened in the 50s and the 40s and the earlier times. But this, as you said, happened in the 1990s. And that's not that long ago. Yeah,
right. So, in the last time it was the Ku Klux Klan, it was in 88. They actually shot up and firebombed the offices. And then after that, they moved to a different office on the same street, on Ferris Street, which is where a lot of it used to be like the first African American neighborhood in Jackson. And so Ferris Street would kind of be likened to Beale Street in Memphis.
I see.
It's not as
125th Street in Harlem.
Right. In its history, it's not as vibrant as, Beale Street or something like that would be, but in its history, it was, the street where people went to get their, medicine from Harmon's Pharmacy. Right.
Interesting.
Different shoe shining or hats or, whatever the case may be. It was a staple in the first black community in Jackson.
And the newspaper was there.
Right. The newspaper has always been either on like the corner of Farish and Hamilton Street or, on Farish Street itself.
And
so
obviously that was a conscious decision by Uncle Charlie to do that, to be there.
Oh, for sure. Be there, to be, where people could, find us easily, to be where the people who were kind of impoverished or needed the most help were.
Amazing and not surprising. As I mentioned to you, DeAnna, I just want to let our listeners know they're listening to the Danny Tisdale Show on Harlem World Radio. And, of course, I'm Danny Tisdale, and I'm speaking to our guest, my cousin, DeAnna Marie Tisdale, and we're talking about my uncle, her father, Charles Tisdale, who was the owner of the Jackson Advocate, and we are talking Black History Month today on the show. So, DeAnna, I wanted to get right back to it. And, I wanted to start off like I did with the last episode with, not quotes from you, not quotes from me, but from other folks who talk about Charles Tisdale also. And activist Charles Evers, brother of slain civil rights leader Medgar Evers, said Tisdale was concerned about the welfare of all citizens, not just blacks. Before the Jackson Advocate, there was no coverage for black folks because of Mr. Tisdale's stance and fight. The newspaper has enlightened us and is a vehicle to keep us informed. And DeAnna, I wanted to get right back to you and ask you the question: when did you realize who Uncle Charles Tisdale was when you were growing up? That he owned a newspaper, he had this history. When did you realize that? When the sun opened up and the clouds cleared, was there? Do you kind of remember that moment, or just over time you gradually understood?
I think over time I just gradually understood. I have always had a strong sense of community through my parents, who both worked in community. Aaron Henry is my godfather, who was the NAACP field secretary and then the first president of the NAACP in Mississippi, state president for Mississippi. And he's actually the reason why my parents met. My mother, who is from Wisconsin originally, she moved to Mississippi to be black. She wanted the black experience because she's fairly fair-skinned with green eyes and never really lived in a community with all African-American people. And so she moved to Mount Bayou, which was all black at the time, and one of the first black towns to have all black church, all black everything basically. And so she became the president of the NAACP there, and through that heard the call of my dad going through the NAACP to say that they had been firebombed, and so she moved to Jackson to work for the paper. And from there it's just history. I came into the mix, and I've always had a sense of community and doing well work for others, good work for others.
Good work for others. I was, thinking about kind of some of the maybe challenges is not the right word to use, but, I have, my own life, and then there's the life of, Harlem World Magazine. You have your life as an artist, and then there is a life of the Jackson Advocate by way of your father. And sometimes, sometimes I still have a challenge between the two. And more I try to bring those two worlds together. Has that been a challenge for you, being an operatic star and being an associate publisher of the Jackson Advocate, or you just merge them and throw them all together?
It has been very difficult. Sometimes I would like to do one more than the other, or vice versa, And so it's hard to balance. I think it's for everyone. It's hard to, find that balance in life of all this, your passion and your work and your family and, all of those things. But I found, and I hope I'm not coming up too spiritual, but I've just found, just really leaning on God and allowing him to order my steps and direct my path has really worked for me because, you know, sometimes music weighs more and I'm doing more of that, and sometimes I'm doing more of stuff for the paper. So I just kind of let him direct my path on it.
That makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like a great strategy for life, no matter what you're doing, and it makes complete sense. And I didn't ask you when we've talked before this podcast, and so I'm asking you now, and I'll use this segue to ask the question, because what I didn't say in the beginning is that you wear more than one or two, or should I say 2 or 3 hats, because you're associate publisher. You obviously are working passionately in your craft as a singer. Are you a mom? Because I know you're a wife. Are you also a mom, or?
Not yet. We're trying to actually find time for that, and my mom, she buys stuffed animals everywhere she travels,
I'm sure she
so
does.
she gives me little subtle hints.
I'm sure of that.
My parents-in-law or my parents-in-love, they definitely are ready for some little ones. So the time is coming.
So you're getting it from all directions almost.
The time is coming. We will have been married 3 years in July, and so we, just getting to know each other, getting to fill each other out in a marriage, and now I think we're at the place where we're ready to, spend time on having a family, because that is another component that you have to juggle as well. I really admire men and women who are parents and are also working and doing what they love all at the same time. I know it's not an easy task.
Well, certainly so, and I've been, how can I describe it, living the first half of my life doing exactly what I have wanted to do, and now as I live the second half of my life, I'm just complete opposite. How can I help community? How can I help not just myself? So I hear you, and I give you your props on, taking the steps that you have to do what you have. And I wanted to kind of go back and talk a little bit more about the arts side of what you do, and that's your singing. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that's progressing and some of the next steps that you are taking with your singing?
Sure. Well, I've always loved to sing. My mom, she blew up this big picture of me singing at my elementary school. I actually went to a private school that's for African Americans. It's the only one in my hometown for African Americans, and it teaches African and African American culture and history, and it's called Adiambo School. And so I got another sense of who I was from, the type of school that I went to, from preschool up until 5th grade. I went there, and so we learned to sing there. We had programs every Kwanzaa, every Black History Month, every graduation cycle. So we learned a lot about ourselves. I was, memorizing speeches before I could really walk that well, and singing.
Getting you ready for presentations.
Well. Exactly. So at our church, we have, productions that we do with the children, and I kind of I guess I want them to know that they can do the things that I did, you know.
Right.
I know they didn't go to the same type of school that I did, but I know that they can do it because we did it. And so I kind of pushed them a little bit to, you know, really memorize things and really have emotion and feeling when they, you know, are reciting something or doing a production at our church. Because I know that they can do it, and because I learned it at a young age.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that in the video I was watching before the podcast, you were at one of the high schools. I think it was the Jackson Public School District, and you were singing, and after you sang the song, you mentioned to the kids in the audience to be detailed oriented, to, you know, whatever you're working on, to look at it in detail, to take their time to, you know, focus in that way. And I, you know, as an educator, I connected with that immediately. So, you know, just more props to, again, the work that you're doing. And, you know, DeAnna, I wanted to also mention that I'm going to circle back to you because I'm trying to figure out, you know, how to, with my work that I'm doing in New York, how to bring our worlds together to honor both Uncle Charlie and at the same time, you know, use the honoring of Uncle Charlie by honoring some of the great work that, you know, people are doing in Harlem that's committed to the community. So I haven't quite figured that out yet. I will reach back to you on that. But I wanted to use our conversation today to, you know, lay a little foundation for that. And for, you know, any parents out there that are listening and their son or daughter has an artistic talent, you have any advice for them on what they should do with that son or daughter who has that talent?
Yeah, the first thing that I would say is to really watch for their natural talent, like their natural ability, because kids show it really, really quickly. My husband has a very large family, and one of his baby cousins is just turned 2 years old, and he for sure is a musician. Like, he's only 2, but he'll pick up a tambourine. He'll get on the he'll get on the drums, and if you try to get him off the drums, he will cry, and he'll get on the piano and pluck around. I mean, it is for sure in his cards to be a musician and to just really cultivate that. You know, if you see that their inclination, to nurture that and to really look at what they're interested in and say, they're always, you know, banging on something. Maybe they want some drums, you know, where can I, you know, take them where they have, you know, drums, or can I buy a drum set, you know, or a lot of kids like my.
But DeAnna, we're already, we're already at our minute point here where we only have a minute and change left, and I do have another question for you, but matter of fact, I have a number of questions for you, but I'm just going to ask you, is there any website, email where our listeners can stay in contact with you that you can share with them?
Sure. My email address is DeAnna Tisdale, that's Tizzie Johnson, that's my married name, at gmail.com.
Great. We've got a few more seconds left, and I'm going to try and squeeze this one question. You know what, DeAnna, we just don't have any more time left. I just want to thank you for being on the show, and I may have to have you back on the show if I can twist your arm from a few thousand miles away and see if I can get you to do that. But thank you so much for being on the show. I loved it and want more. But thank you, and, the best of luck to you and the family, and I hope to speak to you soon. Thank you, DeAnna.
No problem at all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Tonight, it's Chicago Med and the epic Chicago Fire PD crossover event with a case so dangerous,
There's been a robbery every 72 hours.
it will take 2 teams to solve. Wednesday's biggest dramas are on NBC.
And think there's no reason to stay up until 11? Let's do the math. 4 radars, more choppers, and this team equals more coverage at 11. Chuck, Colleen, Fritz, Fred. Call on these 4 before you call it a night. NBC 4 News at 11.
Tonight, it's Chicago Med and the epic Chicago Fire PD crossover event with a case so dangerous,
There's been a robbery every 72 hours.
it will take 2 teams to solve. Wednesday's biggest dramas are on NBC.
And think there's no reason to stay up until 11? Let's do the math. 4 radars, more choppers, and this team equals more coverage at 11. Chuck, Colleen, Fritz, Fred. Call on these 4 before you call it a night. NBC 4 News at 11.